Welcome back to Dork Points, everybody. This is Ron, and this is a very special spotlight episode. Yes, it's Soul Reaver, one of the first of its kind, or maybe the only of its kind. This is a collection of Soul Reaver 1 and 2. We're going to focus on Soul Reaver 1 for the most part. I love this intro, by the way. One of the best intros in gaming ever. Cain is deified, the clans tell tales of him, few know the truth. So this is a semi-open world game that feels like it was initially like a deeper RPG or like a love letter to Zelda or Elder Scrolls. It seems like it was reduced and simplified and like distilled into like this hack and slash explorer. There was nothing like it. At the time when it came out on PlayStation 1. That's right, PlayStation 1. By the way, because this is a remake, they have all the lost levels or the levels that were never finished. There's no enemies here. You can fall off the map at any time if you just crawl in the right direction. But it's cool that they included them. But yeah, it's an amazing game when you get into it. It's so big and it's singular. It's amazing. Even the sequel doesn't feel like the same game. In fact, all the games in the Legacy of Kain series, Blood Omen 1 and 2, Soul Reaver 1 and 2, Legacy of Kain Defiance, they're all weird and distinct, like multiple companies, multiple developers. It's fascinating, really, because each game is like the epitome of like where gaming was at that time. Legacy of Kain was like top down and looking very much like Link to the Past. But the same goes for Soul Reaver, which was 1 year behind Ocarina of Time and lacking much of the depth as far as interactions with like NPCs and side quests. I never owned a Nintendo 64. I got my hands on a hand-me-down PlayStation 1 sometime in the late 90s. I found Soul Reaver on sale at a Blockbuster at the time for a great deal. I think it was like $7. I can't tell you exactly when, but by the time I actually beat the game Soul Reaver, the PlayStation 2 was coming out. And within a year or so of that, the sequel was announced, and because of that, like I kind of saved up a bunch of money and called in a bunch of favors from friends in order to get a PlayStation 2 as quickly as I could, and because of that, it's the only console that I ever owned with like in a year or two of its release date. Usually I'm behind like 4 or 5 years. But anyways, let's get into the game. This is strictly just a reskin of the original. You can press R3 to see the original graphics, which I appreciate, but the first time it happens is actually confusing because you're just playing the game and you just hit it as anyone would because there's no tutorials here. This is a PS1 game. Obviously, the appreciation of this game for most folks is just nostalgia. So, of course, the reskin's not going to hold up to any modern standards. There's a lot of block puzzles. There's a lot of flipping boxes, though there are some amazing environmental puzzles as well. You can shift between the living world and the spirit world, which at the time was completely mind-blowing. And, I'm not going to get into, like, the story itself because the story's kind of murky. I don't necessarily like the way it finished at the end of Defiance. No spoilers here, but I like everything else about this. I love the world. I love like this Shakespearean lyrical way they talk to each other. So there's good writing here, but I don't love the final result of Defiance. And I think maybe a lot of fans don't, which is why this exists and why we could get a better ending than Defiance or if we have a reboot or something. Though, if I'm being honest, I would just be overjoyed with this resulting in even a remaster of Defiance, though I don't love it 100%. Let's talk about gameplay. Like I said, a lot of box moving, puzzle solving. The platforming in general is slippery as hell and sometimes very unpleasant, but it is a PS1 game just reskinned, so that's the nature of the beast. Um, I used to play this game every single year from like 99 to 2011, but sadly, I had to look two different moments up in this game, like playthroughs, to proceed forward in a game I played for like straight every year for a decade. So if you are a new person coming into this game, my prayers are with you. Thinking back to my original playthrough, there were so many times where I was completely lost, and all the amazing secret areas of this world were only found because I couldn't figure out how to actually get through the main story and proceed it any further. So honestly, I don't think this is going to be a game that attracts any new fans. Unfortunately, I think that would only come from like a full reboot or remake. As far as Soul Reaver 1, I say buy it because I want the series to continue or at least get a reboot or something. But I understand that coming into these games as a first timer would be very jarring. So I say buy it, but it's just because I want this series to continue or be reborn. But, you've been warned appropriately about that. Now, as far as Soul Reaver 2 goes, I have to admit, I'm just not that interested. I got to the second temple and realized suddenly that there was no manual save. These temples are really long and fairly confusing. And again, I haven't played these for over a decade, so I got into the second temple and I just kind of put the game down for a later date. The second one definitely holds a smaller place in my heart. It didn't blow my mind. It was just kind of that rush of getting a new console and seeing the next gen. And obviously, I know the story and where it goes, so there's just not as much of a push to experience it again. And that has a lot to do with the save points and these huge Reaver temples, which take hours to complete. Both games are completely authentic to the originals. Again, they're just reskins, but the original has a manual save system, so all your progress is saved. But when you do come back to the game after closing it, you are in the first level, like with the Cthulhu thingy, and then you have to use the portal system to go back to everywhere you want. But your blocks and puzzles are solved, and they're still there. Whereas with the second one, you have to do every puzzle, every Reaver temple again, from the last point you saved. So yeah, it's just a little disheartening, unfortunately. But there you go. Yes, Soul Reaver. Soul Reaver. Play Soul Reaver. Support it if you can. Thank you for watching Dork Points. Goodbye.